Come one, come all to the HockeyBuzzcast today. Welcome. We have it's a story of a lovely lady. Anyway, you look a little like the Brady Bunch.
That makes you Florence Henderson, Heck.
Yeah, I guess so. Sometimes you're not the first person. Russ, what do you have to say?
Just a quick note. In hockey, we always talk about grudge games that come up during the year from things from previous seasons, and the NFL has one that's coming up, and it seems like the Steelers are kind of trying to downplay it because one Myles Garrett from the Cleveland Browns beat their backup quarterback over the head with a helmet, and they're like, no, we're past that. We're not going to do anything. And I'm like, I think there'll be something going on in that game. It might not be overt, but whether it's in the offensive line in the trenches or something, I think there's going to be some dirty play because that was one of the dirtiest plays in the last couple of years.
They'll throw him a towel laced with COVID.
Something's going to happen. These teams don't like each other to begin with, but I just like the fact that they were playing it down. And when we see it play down in hockey, it always manifests at some point. And this is probably the only shot they've got. So to me, that's the game to watch this week. There you go.
I miss the good old fashioned days of the Colorado Red Wings, stuff that you used to have, the big fights. I heard one of these was on Next Time the other day. They're replaying a highlight of Chris Draper, like Peter Forsberg, all kinds of crazy stuff going on. And man, that was when revenge was revenge. That's when you really had something in hockey.
I've got a pre-show note. I spent the morning and part of the afternoon with a guy that I'm sure Russ is familiar with. I don't know if the rest of you will remember him, but the great Willie Horton of the Detroit Tigers.
Oh, Horton, sure.
Yeah, I've written a couple of books with Willie, and we're talking about maybe doing a third book. I went to see him. He's going to turn 80 this week. He looks terrific. Had eye surgery 3 days ago, and you wouldn't know it. Full of life and spunk. And, it's interesting, Russ, and I'd love to get your thoughts on this. I've always felt the most menacing looking hitter. And by that, the intimidating pose as he stood in the batter's box, I always thought it was Eddie Murray. I thought he was the most intimidating hitter I ever saw. But I thought Willie Horton was second. He had that not a wiggle, a waggle with his bat. And he stood in there. He always looked mean when he stared out back at the pitcher, and he dug in with his cleats, pretty heavily. Yeah,
and I would always see him when he played the Yankees, but they played the Tigers quite a bit back in the old days. And he was probably a DH at that point, or first base. Was he first base at that point?
Horton
after Freehand was gone, maybe?
No, he didn't play any first base.
So DH.
Yeah, he was a DH.
But I do remember him being pretty intimidating, having great power. Like he had tremendous power. But I still kind of have to give the edge to Eddie Murray. And Eddie Murray, he took that to the golf course. I know somebody that golfed with him, and what you saw, like in his playing days on the field, he took that to the golf course too. Like nobody liked him even playing golf.
I always thought Don Baylor was very.
Baylor's a good one.
Intimidating.
Yeah, he's good. Yeah,
and the thing is, I think he led the major leagues in all time in being hit by the pitch until somebody, I think Biggio broke it, and I'm like, if I was a pitcher and I hit Don Baylor, I'd be running for the outfield fence.
One more guy, Stargell, with the bat waggle and the tremendous home run power. He may not have been feared with the scowl, but he was feared with just pitching the wrong pitch.
Sure, but you can't be menacing if you do that windmill thing with the bat.
I don't know.
He did it when he got older. Not when he was younger. More so when he got older.
That was a little bit when he was older, like a showman.
Like in terms of intimidation with what they were going to do to you, there were guys more intimidating than Murray and Horton.
Yeah.
But I'm just talking about how they looked.
Okay. All right.
When they stepped in. And Stargell was menacing looking, particularly. I think Jan's right, early in his career. But once he got that windmill thing with the bat, it looked like the circus had come to town.
Two guys that come to mind.
He was a great hitter.
Yes.
Oh yeah. Two guys that come to mind is goalie FP said Gary Sheffield, because Sheffield also had the bat wiggle, and when he got locked in, and the other guy honestly was Dave Parker in the box.
For sure, all those guys are in the conversation.
Parker in the box, just looking out, was scary as anything when he was in his prime.
Yeah.
Roger Clemens was intimidating to Piazza.
So on the mound, the most intimidating.
You don't want to know my opinion on Roger Clemens, Mike.
No, it was Bob Gibson for sure.
I would say with Dave Stewart as a pretty close runner-up.
Yeah, Stewart was close.
Stewart was pretty close.
And Stewart had just enough wildness.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Exactly. You didn't know where he was going.
And he clearly had the scowl on the mound. That's for sure, Stewart.
That's what I'm saying. He was frightening. There was something.
I'll tell you one of my favorites. One of my favorites in that category, and he's on Facebook, and we're just Facebook friends, was Al Roboski, because you didn't know what he was going to do.
Mad Hungarian.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's a great nickname. One of the great nicknames.
I love Senior Smoke. I really love that.
I'm sorry. If you're going that direction, there's only one guy, and it's got to be Mitch Williams, because you had no idea where the ball was going.
No, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't mean to turn this into baseball today.
I like it. No, I like it. I mean, you're actually mentioning guys that I remember watching play.
I had to look up Horton's numbers, and they were even better than what I thought. So that's good.
Yeah, I mean, he was a good player. A very good player.
A lot of RBIs, 1,100 RBIs. I mean,
it's interesting. Is he was often Mayo Smith in particular would replace him in the outfield and in big games, late innings, and that the play he's most remembered about is throwing Lou Brock out at home in the
68 World
Series.
That play I'm not even that familiar with.
Yeah, well, no, it was a big. If he scores, they end up taking a 2 or 3 lead, and he guns them out. And in fact, we just talked about this again today, even though I obviously know the story. And it was all about a scouting report that he had with Freehand before the game. They had talked about that. The scouts had noticed that he was getting a little lackadaisical because he knew he could beat any throw when he was on second base, and there was a line drive to left field. And so they realized that, and he was so fast that he didn't have to slide, and so of course he didn't slide, and Horton gunned him out. And the photo that the AP had captured all, you could just see the actual call because Freehand was blocking the plate and got the ball and tagging him out, and the guys, Lou Brock's foot was not on home plate, so the call was genuine.
Excellent.
Yeah, let's start.
All right, here we go. I'm going to get into some crazy other fun cap space things today. There's nothing like it.
I do have a little news out of Ottawa too, Ek. That's important.
We'll get to that too.
Just to let you know. Yep.
Hello, Hockey World. It is Friday, October 16th, 2020.
I'm Michael Agello, and my brother is a Cardinals fan, and to this day he hates Mickey Lolich and Don Dankinger.
I'm Jan Levine. It's nice to have Anthony back again.
Yes.
Aww.
Sweet.
Thanks, Jan. That's very nice of you.
Make up for Mike.
Leave all the vitriol for everybody else. I'm Anthony Majoni from Multipose Radio.
Russ Cohn from Sportsology.
Kevin Allen.
And I'm Eklund. You're watching the Hockey Buzzcast on HockeyBuzz.com. We are 1 week after UFA free agency now. And it feels like just yesterday that we did that long show for free agency. And yet, it was a whole week ago, which is astonishing to me. This has been a fun week. I really have enjoyed. I've enjoyed this draft and free agent period more than any other I've ever recovered. I don't know why that is, but it's just maybe it's because it was quick. Probably a lot of it had to do with us getting to work with Kevin during this period, which has been incredibly fun. But just the whole thing of it has just been a blast. And yet it's still not over. We still have 30 players on my trade rumor chart, which is kind of crazy. There's a lot to get done.
You better hope it's not over for another couple months because we're not playing until January.
Oh, I know, but the funny, and that's very true, and I'm all for players taking their time to sign. But I really am like saying, I mean, when I have a look at my rumor chart, these are 30 legitimate players that I don't think are going to be where they are, and this is like or some of them aren't anywhere at all. So yesterday or a couple of days ago, I went into the chart and I updated all these players. And then today what I was doing was I was going through the cap space of every team and seeing what they needed and what they had left per player, and how many players they had signed. And it is kind of fascinating. Like the Anaheim Ducks are an interesting one, right? They've got 22 players signed, which is basically what you need, 22 players, but they only have one goalie signed, so they've got no money. They've got zero cap space. So they're going to be doing something, right? I mean,
let's start off with this because I heard this statistic.
Yeah.
I think Elliot Friedman mentioned it this morning. It's something like 90.5% of the
92 actually.
Yeah, available
92%. Based on what I saw on Cap Geek, and it was 92% actually, and that is something. That is really, really something. So when you look around some of these teams, the one that jumps out at me right away is the Boston Bruins. Okay, the Boston Bruins have 21 players signed, 2 goalies signed. They've got 14 forwards, 5 defense. They probably could use a defender, signed, another good defender to come in. And they're sitting there with like 1 player basically needed and almost $13 million in cap space, and that is not Boston Bruin like. That is like, to me, that is so either something went wrong or we're missing something. Kevin, what do you think's going on?
Well, first of all, unless I missed this today while I was out and about, they either have to re-sign Jake DeBrusk or trade him for a player who's going to come back for him. He's not going to be inexpensive. Right. We haven't even discussed the fact that Chara is still out there, and the something is that he's going to come back and play with Boston. So he's not a big ticket anymore, but he's a ticket. Right. Well, they have those 2 guys to worry about. I think they're still sort of trying to get a handle on what the Tuukka Rask situation is for them now and moving forward. Mm-hmm. They have to start planning in that regard. But saying all that, I said recently on a radio interview, if I'm looking at for a team that I think I don't know what their plan is, I completely agree with you. What was Boston's plan? Was it to try to get Taylor Hall and they didn't get him? Was it try to get Peter Angelo? And if so, why did they allow Torrey Krug to get away?
The way they let Torrey Krug go too, like they apparently didn't make a new offer. They made an offer last year at $6.5 million. The rumor is they didn't make a new offer to Torrey Krug, who wanted to stay there, wanted to stay there. And everyone has been a great soldier. And Chara is going to come back for a little, probably for a little bit. I mean, there have been teams. The Flyers did talk to Zdeno Chara, which I thought was incredible. That I could actually put Zdeno Chara on the rumor chart for the first time in his career, but I could.
And I want to get Anthony's point of view on this before he has to go. The Bruins have acted weird because they put that offer out to Krug and then they pulled it back. That was the report. The report coming out of Boston was they offered it before free agency on October the 9th, and then they pulled it back, and then he got the same AAV out of St. Louis with the extra year. So basically, once the door was closed to Boston, he went out in the market and got the same amount and was, I'm assuming he wanted to stay in Boston, but they clearly didn't want to spend $6.5 million on a smallish power play type of defenseman. But honestly, it's like, look at their defense now.
Yeah, it's a strange thing without question. I mean, seeing again, as you stated, all the reports were of what the deal was. Just an extra year is enough to make Krug go. But I think he said it afterwards. We all saw the quote that, they didn't contact. And how would we feel as individuals if, the team you've really just, done blood, sweat, and tears for, pardon the cliche, literally gives you one offer. And then after that, you hear no communication. You're going to leave on principle. At that point, you're going to feel a certain way and leave on principle.
And there are very few more unsung guys than Torrey Krug has been in Boston. Like, he really has given them good stuff without really ever taking the credit for anything. We're joined now by
my pit bull.
Horrible.
I'm going to show you my puppy before the end of the show. My puppy's going to make an appearance for the end of the show. All right, so. Yeah, so Kevin, the other thing about that is, and Anthony, to follow up on what you're saying, there was a press conference that was like a crazy press conference that was canceled out of the middle of nowhere in Boston and moved later, which implied weird echoes. Sorry, which implied at the time that they were up to something, and I kind of thought it was Taylor Hall. It seemed like it had to be Taylor Hall, or maybe it was. Maybe it was Pietrangelo because Pietrangelo signed right after that too. It was one of those 2 players. I have to believe that $13 million is sitting there with the intention at one point of it being used for those players.
I don't know. I mean, I saw that they had one scheduled and moved it. A lot of GMs were doing that though, so I never really thought much of it. I don't think that there was anything.
The reason I thought something of it was because the Ty Anderson thought something of it. Okay, and Ty. Being tied with the news, being tied with the radio station there in Boston, that usually means
there are always conspiracy people out there.
I know, but
they are.
That Ty definitely is a conspiracy theorist to the hill. There's no 2 ways about that. I'll buy that.
You know that.
I know that, but at the same time, I think that there was something else up. And
but you remember they were all updating what was going on with them in free agency. So I just think that, maybe if they had one conversation or something, they moved it back. But I never really thought much of it.
I don't think they thought they had one of those players.
Yeah.
But you think they were holding back that money for the possibility of it?
Yeah. Oh, I think they were. I thought they felt like they had a chance to get one of the heavy hitters, but obviously they did.
And now with all that money there, with
they
all
can
the
still
money,
get Hoffman. He's still sitting there.
Right, with all that money sitting out there, Hoffman.
Yeah.
You've got the defenseman, like Vatanen.
No,
right?
but the idea is that's
got guys
great
out there that they could get for very little right now.
Yeah, but forgetting about free agents, they have to sign Chara because at some point this guy could leave if he doesn't. If I'm guessing they haven't given him the right offer.
Yeah, I know that some of the writers in Ottawa think that there's a possibility of him going back to Ottawa.
Yeah, I mean,
who says he can't go home again?
You never say never in this world, but you have to believe.
Wade Redden will join him.
You have to believe
he's counting the Rangers' money still.
Chris Phillips.
That Boston has to give him some sort of an offer. I'm assuming they haven't given him one that he's liked.
I don't think it's an offer, Russ. I think, as Zach said, it's more so showing the guy who's your captain that there's a level of interest there and that you have a strong desire to bring back. I think the money may be somewhat secondary. It's a matter of how you recognize his place within the organization.
That's fair.
Well, let's say this. I mean, I would and opinions on this. I think that Sweeney and Chara and Neely and that group of characters have talked this out already. And Chara knows what he's wanted. And Chara's sitting back waiting, knows so much money they could offer. And they probably said, if somebody else can really offer you a lot more, go to it. But he said, I'm not going to go anywhere. You can see this conversation happening. Just go get your business done. Come back to me. Put the best team you can on the ice. Like that's how I see Chara working this. I don't see Chara sitting there thinking he's not being taken care of. I don't think that's
I would be stunned, Kev, if Chara was playing anywhere else next year. I mean, the thing is, though, I believe he's 43 now. The days of him playing 25 minutes a night are over with. Maybe the fact that, they have to sort of transition to McAvoy and Grzelcyk and Jeremy Lawson and their younger defensemen, and maybe bring somebody in free agency who's out there still, like Hamonic or Vatanen. I mean, I think they have to do that. And I just can't see Don Sweeney all of a sudden saying we're going to do a reset.
Yeah, I would say that I agree with Eklund, but I'm going to add a but.
Okay.
Like, Matt Cater, who I've known, who's a strong agent. He's certainly not like Alan Walsh. He's never going to be over the top in anything. But he was quoted by Pierre LeBrun as saying, we're going to explore all options. Now, I don't think Matt would have said that if this was all worked out. I think he would have just stayed mum. Now, I haven't talked to Matt in a while, but I think there might, it comes down to respect. And even though I think everybody sort of knows generally where Chara should be, and I agree with you in that regard, like they've talked before, like, when it would bring you back, we won't be able to pay you, $6 million. It's going to be in the $2 to $3 million range, that kind of thing. You still want to feel loved, and there's a respect.
And they're not showing him that so far.
Yeah, I think they take his calls. I mean, they take his calls. It's not like they're not taking his calls.
They have all these injuries and all these other problems. You've got this guy who is really the biggest name on your team other than Bergeron, and he's just sitting out there sort of just like, all right, I guess I'll wait.
I mean, he's not the all-time great Bruin.
It'd be done.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, would you put him, Russ, you're the one who does the books of great all-time people. He's in the top 100 Bruins all-time players.
Absolutely.
It might be.
He's in the top 4 Bruins defensemen of all time.
Yeah, it might be in the top 10. I mean, there's a lot of Bruins. So
there's a lot of Bruins, but
Eddie Shore, Bobby Orr, Ray Bork.
Yeah.
All right, so let's move to the next team that never has cap space and is sitting out there with cap space right now, which is another crazy thing, and that would be the Chicago Blackhawks. All right, the Blackhawks never have cap space. I mean, they've been over the cap. They've paid fines. They've paid different things. They have 2 players left to sign, and they're sitting on $18.8 million in cap space. The Chicago friggin' Blackhawks.
Well, they're probably seeing if they could trade for a goalie, and they would have to take on some salary if they do that. There's no way that Bowman's happy with those goalies, but right now he had to go with that. So that's where I think that cap space is going to be saved for.
That's a lot of cap space for a goal.
No, I mean not all that. You got to pay 2 players too.
Just to correct you, they have almost that amount in deadline cap space in terms of current cap space, which is what you have to go out, and they have about $5 million.
$5 million is what I see. Also,
wait, where am I pulling this off at then? I'm pulling it off our thing here.
But the point is made. I mean, right now,
unless you're moving Seabrook to long-term IR. And freeing up $6.8 million.
Which they Randy brings up a good point in the chat room.
That must be what I'm talking. That must be why
Calgary's looking to dump Rittich. That might be someone the Blackhawks would be willing to.
There's 2 issues at work here. First of all, they don't have that amount of cap space. They're kind of tight.
All right, let me go back to that because I'm confused. I'm going to do some research. Continue.
Yeah, but also, what are they doing there? Are they rebuilding?
Yeah.
Or are they trying to sort of change on the fly? Are they in between? Like, what are they doing there?
And they haven't told their players what they're doing. Which
I think Patrick Kane and Jonathan Taves want to know that also. It sounds like,
and I think that's part of the issue there. If you look at what Rocky Wirtz has done, he's moved a lot of people out. Really, the only person who's still there is Stan Bowman. Right. Otherwise, everybody's, kind of moved. So is Rocky Wirtz thinking, maybe it's time to kind of retool. And if you're retooling, the first thing you do is you stop spending to the cap. So
the funny thing is, Kev, and I just looked at it right now, and when we remember when Kane and Taves signed those 8-year extensions,
right?
There's only 3 years left on them.
Oh, I know.
And it's so I mean, we think, oh my God, it's going to be so difficult for them to trade. If all of a sudden Jonathan Taves or Patrick Kane asked out, how difficult it would be to trade them. Maybe not. If you retain half the salary, retain some of it.
Well, first of all, you could trade Kane even at $10 million.
Oh,
sure.
Yeah.
Taves, maybe you'd have to take some salary, but even so, people would love to have Taves.
Yeah.
He's a captain. He's a leader. He's, like there's nothing wrong with the Taves and Kane contracts. It's the Seabrook, Duncan Keith contracts that got him in trouble, particularly Seabrook. And, Seabrook, who was so valuable to that team during their run. Just think, like he was better always in the postseason than he was even in the regular season. And now all of a sudden, boy, he's just a real drag on
He just took a beating.
Yeah, on the cap. Situation.
He played hard minutes. He played tough hockey.
Time has not been kind to him nor Duncan Keith. More so, obviously, Seabrook than Keith.
Right.
Keith still is, I'd say, mildly affected. But you look at the pipeline in that organization, and I'm not quite sure. They may have a decently long fallow period because you don't see a ton of guys coming up in that system that are difference makers based upon what you see.
I mean, other than Boquist, you're right.
I think Kirby Dotch. I mean, after
Dotch, yes,
Dotch,
he's on the team already.
Right, but I mean, he's 19. I'm just saying, it's like he's gonna ascend into probably a second line center role this year, and then you have Taves and Dotch 1, 2. That's and probably Dylan Strome is a 3 unless they trade him off someplace.
It's defensively, I was thinking about it. It really is Boquist and Ian Mitchell, and then a bunch of guys.
All right, so next team, and this. I'm sorry for getting that number wrong.
After last year to let Crawford go. And not bring back Delia, right? It just doesn't make any sense because they look like in the playoffs that they could do some damage if they got another guy offense, especially if Crawford repeated what he did. To go this direction, they kind of look like they're pulling the plug a little bit.
And apparently they only offered Crawford a 1-year deal, so he walked.
Moving on to a next team here, okay? Because that number could be, that number is, like you say, depending on what they put Seabrook and all that stuff. But here's a team that I think I have right, which is the New York Rangers cap space. Okay, which is, they made a couple really nice signings here in the last day or so, but their cap they are sitting now for the Rangers, another team that usually spends to their credit card limits. They're sitting there with almost $11 million.
No,
really. Not that much.
Bonus,
not really, because you have the bonus cushion that you need to factor in.
Right. Okay, give me the bonus cushion.
$9.5 million, which brings them down to about 7, and they still got to re-sign Strome and Lemieux.
Right.
Okay, so 7. They got those 2 players.
They might have $2 million when you're all said and done.
Okay.
Maybe.
All right. Okay.
They got nothing. They got nothing.
They got nothing. All right, so let's talk about teams who have a ton of cap space.
But I will tell you this. That doesn't mean they weren't looking at these other guys on the market, because I was told that they may have been looking at some of those other guys, but, things got too rich.
Well, here's the story of all, though, that we haven't talked about. And that is that we know that they shopped D'Angelo. We know that because we've talked to general managers who, talked to them about that as possible. Seems like they were committed. They were going to do that. Primarily, I think, just for salary cap. So, the trade they made with the Red Wings when they moved out Stahl, that basically, in my opinion, saved D'Angelo.
It did.
Yes.
Yeah.
And what a shrewd move that was.
And they kept him under 5, which was smart. I felt like they were going to do that, because if they kept him under 5, then they definitely were keeping Strome under 5. And Strome, I'd be surprised if he's a 2-year. I'm sure he's going to be a 1-year, because I don't think they're thrilled with him, but I don't know if they have a choice at this point.
Well, they've talked about walking away.
Yeah, I don't think they can, though.
Well, but it's funny. So this year, remember, it's just like nuance, because you offer X, he asked for Y.
Right.
Let's say the arbitrator awards over, I think it's $4.538 million. The player now has 4 days where he can come back and accept the offer that the team made him.
Right.
So even though you can quote unquote walk away if the award goes above that amount, the Rangers are going to have to come in probably in the $4 million range. And if Strome's seeing what the marketplace is like, doesn't think he's getting that figure, he may come back and say, I know you guys turned me down, but you know what? I'll take your $4 million and pay for you for a year.
Right.
Well, yeah, you're absolutely right, because he's going to look around and see that Craig Smith took less to play for the Boston Bruins than he did for the Nashville Predators, and there were other guys. Obviously the forwards, like the tone of this year's free agent marketplace was, we're going to pay for defensemen. We're not going to pay for forwards.
Yeah, exactly.
You guys, we want you. And we'll take you, but on our terms.
Well,
we never pay for
the interesting thing about that is, obviously since the last time we talked, Taylor Hall signs 1 year, $8 million with the Sabres, and now the indicators out there is that Hoffman is open to a 1-year deal, and the calculation out there is that the free agent class in terms of forwards for next year is so bad that these guys will take a 1-year deal, roll the dice, hope they don't get hurt, and try to hit it big next year, because they're just not going to get paid this year.
I mean, those guys will be the top 2 guys next year,
unless Ryan Nugent-Hopkins is out there and he's not extended by Edmonton.
But so Hall's definitely assuring himself, besides Ovechkin, who's a UFA, but he'll be signed, obviously.
It's a risky thing, though, because you saw what happened with Dak Prescott. That can happen to a player. So let's talk about a couple teams here that have a ton of cap space and are obviously the lesser teams in the league.
Okay.
And that would be, so the 3 teams that are over 18 million right now, according to Cap Friendly. I'm going to short my sources here so we can, know that I'm not just like pulling these out of my butt here. The 3 teams that are over 18 million are the Senators, the Red Wings, and the Devils.
Yep.
And the interesting thing about that is, the Red Wings, the Senators and the Devils both have a lot of contracts to sign. Both are sitting there, like the Senators have 35 of their 50 contracts, 19 of their 23 on the roster. The Devils have 15 of 23 for their roster, so the Devils still have a ton of players to sign, 37 contracts of their 50. But the Red Wings are sitting there at 20 of 23 with 43 contracts.
Yeah, but
go ahead, Cal.
2 of them are Bertuzzi and Anthony Mantha.
Right.
So it's not so much the number of contracts; it's who they are.
And the interesting part for me for all 3, I think all 3 have improved themselves this offseason.
Yeah.
I think Ottawa is clearly on an upward ascension. You have to like what New Jersey did. Look, adding Crawford clearly helps them between the pipes with Blackwood.
Right.
They added Ryan Murray, who was a nice addition also. So they again, and you counter that on top of the moves. Adding Alexander Holtz in the draft this year was another nice move. They added Andreas Johansson when they got from them. So all of a sudden you look up and the Devils are starting to become, I don't know if they're a destination, but clearly a team with Fitzgerald running them that is a much better team run than they were a year and a half ago.
They're still not going to spend big money.
They're a destination because they have the cap space. That's
right.
But they're willing to use it.
All 3 of them. Right, but some of it, but on a short-term basis, all 3 of these teams over the last week or last week and a half traded for DeBranson, Ryan Murray, Detroit with Mark Stahl. They all added 1-year contracts to get to the cap floor, And now next year, those players are unrestricted free agents, and they have this money to spend all over again. So they're improving themselves with these players, but they're going to flip them at the deadline.
Yeah, Eck, you mentioned Ottawa. Like Kevin and I were saying off air, I was talking to someone in Ottawa. Yeah, the fans are excited about Dayton out there. Melnick is making proclamations again, but actually, for as much as we knew that the downtown arena deal was dead, there's another new deal now that may be cropping up in Canada, of all places. Now, the thing that is puzzling even to the person that was telling me is like, well, they have a light rail system that in 2 years will finally be going to the rink there, because they've never had. They're like one of the only places in the world that doesn't have any kind of railroad system, and they're other than Nassau Coliseum.
Yeah, Nassau Coliseum. I was going to say that's a legendary one, because I took
there will be one now, though.
I took public.
Yes, there'll be one now, but there was
one now.
The American
say my story of public transportation from my house.
Okay, so just let me finish. Then you can
Coliseum at some point. You'll be amazed.
But the Coliseum, we'll have it this year, but they didn't have it for a long time, and so now they're kind of rethinking this to keep Ottawa there. So there is kind of a push now to keep the Sens, and I do kind of think, Kev, it's based off of this optimism in the draft and the players that maybe now they're getting back to the bargaining table.
Yeah, and I think you have to look at those three teams differently in terms of their cap space than all the other teams. Like, even though they got a lot of cap space, nobody thinks that they're going to just clean up and pick up off these players thing. I would say the Red Wings and Steve Yzerman has said publicly they might add another player. That's what he said. I think Ottawa might add another player. Maybe New Jersey as well. But Yzerman has made it clear that now's not the time for him to spend his money. And I saw Tom Fitzgerald's press conference as well, the one he did on Zoom, and he basically didn't phrase it quite like that, but he was essentially saying the same thing. You won't see us going, he said, after Hoffman or any of the big scorers, because we value the money we have. So I think even though they do have a lot of cap space, I don't see them as major contenders for the 30 guys that you have left.
Yeah, well, Kevin, what I think that all three of these general managers will do. I mean, remember a few years ago, I think it was Ray Shero in New Jersey, when Lee Stempniak was a walk-on free agent. He brought him in, try out. He had a good year. He flipped him for a second-round pick. Basically, he made a low investment and got paid off with a draft pick. With all these contracts out there, these teams are in positions to shop for bargains for guys that they can flip at the deadline. Now, maybe they'll keep them. Maybe they'll sign them.
The only problem with that, Mike, is next year's draft could be a nightmare. Like, every league is starting late. Sure. We don't know if those dates are going to be good. Right. So you might be talking about all these guys that for these second-round picks, talking about players playing half of what they used to.
Correct. I mean, I'll admit I'll grant that.
That's the only thing that could be a bugaboo.
Now, I'm looking at that list, and after those big three, the Buffalo Sabres are listed fourth, and I've been looking at the Sabres situation, and I've been talking to a few people, and it's like this is sort of smoke and mirrors here, and this is what I talked about with Taylor Hall. They signed Taylor Hall for 1 year, $8 million. They've now got about $13 million under the cap. There have been a lot of reports, a lot of speculation that they have a budget that they're not going to go over, say, $70 million. They've got three restricted free agents in Reinhart, Olofsson, and Ullmark. If they sign all three of them, they're going to be way over that mark. I'm waiting for possibly them trading Reinhart or trading Olofsson or trading one of the defensemen, because
they're probably playing hardball with Reinhart. That's the impression I get.
From what I heard,
it'd be interesting to see where that ends up.
I talked to somebody up there, and it was the exact same conversation, Mike, that you're saying, because you were dead on right about that. But they did tell me that Hall changed some things with that. Yeah. For sure. That now when Hall comes in, your budget, you'll put your budget up a little bit higher now, because now you got Hall. Now you want to see what you can do. Now they see themselves as, hey, we weren't that far out of the playoffs last year. Let's give it a shot. Like we were, I mean, obviously with the new playoff format, they were with the 2014.
Yeah, but I don't think that gets Reinhart a long-term contract.
Right. They were one win out of a 2014 playoff. They were
one team win out of a 2014 playoff. No question about it. I know. But,
it does alter
this year.
It does alter it. That's the same thing that I'm hearing. they got Taylor Hall, and how does it look to Taylor Hall and to Jack Eichel if you go out and get Taylor Hall to create this excitement, and then you trade away Reinhart? Like that.
Right.
They want to be successful there, and they want to sell tickets. Yeah. So I don't see them trading Reinhart.
And as much as we say Hall's a 1-year thing, and as much as that, what he did appears every bit that, they're not looking at it that way completely. I mean, they are saying that could very possibly happen, but they also, the Sabres have always had a self-assured thing that this is a great place to play, and once someone comes here, they're going to realize this is a great place to play. And when you look at a lot of older guys who played here, they've come back and lived here now because it's a great place to live. Yeah. Buffalo and St. Louis. I've also heard two cities that are kind of sneaky that way. Buffalo and St. Louis are both great places where people end up living.
But the problem is with some of these players. So with some of these players, they say, I want to play in Buffalo because I want to be as close to my family in Toronto.
That's true.
It's sort of a second choice. Jeff Skinner, if there was cap room in Toronto, probably would have signed with the Leafs. Because
Buffalo is like Toronto's Embassy Suites. That's what they're like. It's like you can't stay in the big hotel, but you can stay at Embassy.
All right, so I wanted to throw a rumor out there, guys, because I have a rumor for everybody. I want to throw this out there because this is there's two things, and one's Flyers related. So I'm glad Anthony returned. Yesterday, Elliot Friedman was mentioning the Flyers had interest in Jacques Demers. Not Jacques Demers.
Jason Demers.
Jason Demers. I apologize. Jacques, awesome Jacques. But Jason Demers, okay? And I had also heard yesterday that they were getting close to a Gostisbehere trade. And that's what when I tweeted out stuff saying look out, the Flyers are up to something, that's what I was implying. That's what I was hearing. They didn't make it yet, but there's something else. There's something else in the works for the Flyers, and that's for sure. Have you heard anything, Anthony? What are you feeling about that?
Nothing necessarily along those lines. I mean, the Gostisbehere, and I think the minute Eric Gustafsson signed with the Flyers, the immediate comparison to Shane Gostisbehere came into play. And today, during his press availability, certainly Chuck Fletcher spoke to that and described them as being not carbon copies in terms of the players that they are. And in this circumstance, I would say there's still some definite comparison stylistically. Philadelphia needs to have another. I don't think that Philadelphia is ready to go into next season having Phil Myers on the top pair with Ivan Provorov. They could do it, but I think it'd be a bit more of a dice roll after to do that. So Demers would be certainly someone that would fit, I think, the bill as a number 3, number 4 defenseman. That would, I think, give them that additional player. But then they're kind of looking at an overabundance on defense. But then, again, they could potentially have the option of swinging Robert Hagg in and out of the lineup, which, I mean, that's pretty darn good to have it at Robert Hagg as potentially as your number 7 going into the season in that circumstance. So would be interesting if Demers is I could see him as a possibility.
Yeah, I can see it. I mean, and the other rumor that's flying around out there, and I wanted to get Kevin's thought on this, is Patrick Laine. His name is still flying around. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense after they got Peter Paul Stastny. I'm really going. My brain is like stuck in the game today. After they got Paul Stastny, but there are still lots of talks out there about Columbus. Still mentions that Philadelphia got pretty far along the lines with them. Nashville possibly.
Maybe Carolina with the Finn connection.
And it really depends, I guess, what they're getting back. But what are your thoughts, Kev? Do you think it's possible?
Well, I can tell you no for Carolina for sure.
Right.
But I think they are going to try to trade him. Just because I think they think his ask is going to be too high. And his value is never going to be higher than it is now. The people they're talking about are elite prospects that are coming back the other way.
Yeah.
So this is if you're going to move them, now's the time to do it. But the problem is some of the teams you've mentioned don't have a good fit. The Nashville Predators, that would be a great pickup for them. Exactly what they need. To give their top 6 forward group a bang, but they don't have any good prospects,
right?
So at least not elite enough to sort of make that trade. I think my personal thought is that the best scenario would be for him to end up in Columbus, but that's going to have to wait. They've got to get Dubois signed first because they're concerned about the raid that they face on an offer sheet.
Well,
so once they get him signed, then that's a possibility.
See, Kev, it was funny because Pierre LeBrun yesterday apparently he talked to Laine's agent, and while his agent didn't say he wants a trade, he essentially said, "I think it's probably better off if the two parties." Find a solution to this, which basically means he's not gonna, he's gonna probably want more than what Blake Wheeler is making right now, which I think is a little over $8 million, and they're not gonna spend that kind of money on another winger after they're paying, Ehlers and Wheeler and Kyle Connor. They're not gonna spend that kind of money, and maybe Laine just doesn't want to stay in Winnipeg.
Yeah.
So,
I mean,
it doesn't mean they'll be able to trade him, though. That's the funny thing. I mean, they're trying.
Yeah, I think Columbus and Philly have probably the best prospect fits for them. But
yeah, I would agree.
For the Flyers to do it, it's going to take a major gut check for them to make that move, because they're going to have to They're going to have to trade somebody they definitely don't want to trade.
Yeah, there's no question. Like Travis Konecny will be a guy in that trade.
Yeah, for a player who's very one-dimensional,
and probably a defenseman on top of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and again, it's going to come down to, for Philadelphia again, how much do you deserve? And I had this discussion on a podcast over the weekend about, and the other host, Art, was kind of saying, why wouldn't you want Patrick Laine over Travis Konecny? And the fact of the matter is, you have call certainty with Travis Konecny,
right?
He's your leading scorer, and I feel that if you are, There are a lot of things about that Patrick Laine does that are fantastic, but he is, an up and down inconsistent player at times, and that's something that I'll be very curious to see how that would work out with Alain Vigneault and his staff, which tends to be a lot harder.
Here's a good question, Kev. You can answer this one too. Think the reason Nashville has been quiet so far is they're trying to make a trade for a forward instead of getting involved in free agency?
I think they poked their nose in at the free agents. I don't know why they were unable to get it done. They cleared space with the idea that they were going to try to help their their top six forward group. I think they need two forwards in there. To be honest with you, they walked away from Smith and Granlund. Those guys, both of those guys were playing in their top six. Top six wasn't very good. Neither Johansson and Duchesne played very well last season. They tried to see if they can move either one of those. It didn't happen. Yeah, I think the Predators are in a bad place right now.
Kev, let me ask this, because it's been talked about the last 72 hours, and I'm a little skeptical of it, but there's clearly been contact between the Leafs and Joe Thornton. Thornton playing over with Davos in the Swiss League. Apparently, Kyle Dubas, Sheldon Keefe, and half the team have called him saying, "We want you in Toronto." Patrick Marleau came out in an interview and basically says he's talked to Thornton and sort of warned him off on changing cities, which I think might be a little bit of a bitterness toward the fact that the Leafs bought him out of the final, or traded him to Carolina to buy out the final year of the contract. But there's really a full court press on to get Thornton in there to be sort of a leader and a guy in the locker room and somebody who can help them in their bottom six. What do you think of that fit?
Well, it's funny. I just had this debate yesterday on a different podcast. It was me and Bob Duff, and Bob Duff hated the idea, and I love the idea. And the reason I love the idea is we all know what Joe Thornton's all about. Right. He's a tremendous guy in the dressing room. He's just good to have around, whether you're winning or losing. He seems to always know what to say. Guys respect him and love him, and he's still a great passer. Now, the argument would be, well, but the Leafs don't need any more offense. Well, you can never have too many great offensive guys because of injuries and everything else. And I realize he's lost a step and a half, but he can still play and he can still contribute. But the argument against, and the one that Bob made, and I think this is fair, they have Spezza in that role. Can they afford to have two guys in that role? And I think that's a fair argument. But, if it's not going to cost you a lot of money, you still got to fill those 23 roster spots. Right. And if he's willing to come here for $1 million or $900,000 or whatever it is, I think your team is better to have Joe Thornton than not have him.
Yeah, and Spezza played the wing half the time last year, played the right side, and they could play Thornton at center. They could play him on the left wing because he's played some wing with San Jose as well. So I mean, there's some flexibility there, and we don't know. The one point that I heard on the radio this morning is we don't know what the schedule is going to be like. We don't know, if it's going to be 50 games or 60 games and when the season is going to start. And if there are games or weeks when you're playing 4 games in 5 nights, the more good players you can have and maybe older players, play 1 game and rest another game, the better you're going to be. So, I mean, it might be.
Well, but you're slowing down your bottom 6 a lot, though. You already added Simmons. You're adding Thornton. Spencer was never the greatest skater to begin with. Like, you're starting to get slow on the bottom 6, though, Mike.
Yeah, you are, but Simmons. Like, I didn't see that as a good fit. Like, I didn't like that signing. For them. So.
Well, I mean, he and it'll be yet to be proven, but he says after recovering from all of his injuries that he's back up in terms of his speed. I mean, he was slowing down in Philadelphia. We know that. In Nashville, he didn't play well. And in Jersey, they traded him to Buffalo. And in Buffalo, he was hardly noticeable. But, he's been off since last March.
Here's the thing about that, Mike, though, and I think Russ and Anthony will back me up on this. Wayne Simmons has never been about his speed. Like, what makes Simmons good is his quickness with his hands. Like, his hands are crazy quick and tight. And that, I don't think, no matter how much you work out, no matter what you do, I think that does just necessarily go on players.
But he used to be able to get to the net quickly. He doesn't get there quickly
to get to those spots, and that's when his hands. Otherwise, if he's completely isolated, the hands aren't going to do him much good. He's got to be in position, in tight. Usually, his best spot is usually he likes be by the right post.
Yeah, it depends on where they slot him, and honestly, Kev, I think the sort of double secret signing, the one that's going to be the best one of them all, is Jimmy Vesey at $900,000.
Yeah, that's a good.
That was a fantastic signing.
Yeah, no, I agree because those are guys you got to have around. He knows where the net is. You got to have You got to fill those rosters with someone, and I'd rather have a guy who's shown he can score a few goals.
Yeah, and
or in Thornton's case, pass the puck as well as he does.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Thornton's positioning and puck movement was great with San Jose all the way to the end. Patrick Marleau, do we think he's going to?
He signed with San Jose.
He's signed with San Jose.
San Jose. I'm obviously going for the record, right? Like the record of games played.
45. I think he's got left, right? 45.
Yeah, it's a bizarre player to have gotten that record when I look back on his career. Like it just I don't know. I never expected.
Well, it is a bizarre because he was the youngest player ever to play.
True.
He was 18. He stepped right into the league, and
that's true.
I think maybe what Eck means, because I would say this part took me by surprise. He was on that team for so long where maybe when he was starting to fail a little bit in other markets, he would have started to get games cut or whatever. But in San Jose, they just kept trotting him out there the same way. And he produced. He always produced, but he slowed down a little bit. In other markets, they may not have played him as many games.
And Russ, when he went to Toronto, he was basically the guy that Babcock begged them to get. So the last thing that Babcock was going to do is sit the guy that he begged Lou Lamoriello to get for him.
Right.
So
do we see this Montreal Canadiens today? I want to talk about this loaning Kakuniemi.
Yeah, they're loaning to the SM Liga so he can come back when
he can come back. Yeah,
right.
The issue was like the players, like for example, Veleno with the Red Wings. Veleno's there for the rest of the season. The SHL will not allow players to leave and come back. Right. So going to Finland, going to the KHL, going to Germany or Switzerland, they can come back. But Sweden, if it's the SHL,
Sweden and the KHL.
I think the KHL, though, if they have an agreement with the player, they can come back.
Risky at all? I mean, best play. I mean, we're not that far away from the NHL season here. It's not like we're like
we're far away.
Still needs to. I think he still needs. If they have the opportunity,
Christmas isn't around the corner.
If they have an opportunity to keep him going, he's not unlike many of the prospects I think that are going over there.
Aren't we the same amount of time away from the start of the season as we are when we signed on July 1st?
Yeah, I think this is an imaginary start, though, Kev, because this start keeps getting pushed back little increments.
Well,
I don't think anybody's confident.
You need that time.
It's gotten moved up since I heard. I heard it was going to be January 17th, and suddenly it was January 1st.
Behind the scenes, I can tell you, like right in a place that I spoke to in another city, they're gearing up to have their rink ready by February 1st.
Well,
as an example.
I wanted to ask you about this, Kev. It was the Bill Foley comments that he made on the Vegas radio station. He was intimating that, first it was going to be a February 1st start. He said 55 to 60 games, an all-Canadian division. I can tell you right now that the Canadian teams will not be happy if it's an all-Canadian division, because then you're limiting – you could have 6 playoff teams if they just went with the same 6 Canadian playoff teams if you went with a normal setup. If you have a Canadian division, there'll only be 4 playoff teams. They're not going to be happy about it.
We don't know how.
Well, I tell you, they will be happy if they're the only teams that have fans at the building.
Exactly.
True.
And that, my friend, is what this is about.
Yes.
It got nothing to do with competition.
This is necessity. It's pure necessity. I mean,
Melnick says he wants he's going to have 6,000 people in the building, and then he made a joke, says, well, that's more people than we usually have.
Yeah, well, if Canada's COVID situation is better than the USA's, I guarantee we're going to see an all-Canadian division.
Well, I can tell you, it's growing and it's not, and actually the OHL's starting to get affected by it too. So,
well, let's see where we're at.
Yeah. I have a weird feeling, Kev, that the outlook of the Canada-U.S. border may change on November 4th.
Yeah, it could. Yeah, for sure.
It won't be that quick, Mike. We might still be counting votes.
No.
I'm saying we can all be guaranteed.
Oh boy!
When Hanging Chad joins,
okay, wait a minute. Let's have a poll here of our panelists, because this is very important.
Sure.
Which will happen first? Will we start the NHL season, or will we finish the counting of the presidential election?
The election.
We will finish. We will start the NHL season, but we will have a president name before we start, even though the votes will still not be finished counting, but the votes will just be so far out of control that we're going to have such a landslide victory that it's not going to matter.
Yeah. Unfortunately, the current president will probably not show up for the inauguration. He'll probably leave for Mar-a-Lago before.
We don't want to get political because people are going to say they're never going to watch hockey again. We don't want that. So
yeah.
Let's go back to this thing. I did see finally the Carolina Hurricanes made 3 signings today. Do you see this?
Yeah, I saw one of them.
Yes, they signed 3 guys today, and I just lost my notes here, which is
Jeremy Bracco is one of them, right?
Right.
Yeah, and I wrote about this a little bit in my blog act. It's like, I understand sometimes players fall through the cracks. In this instance, a player didn't fall through the cracks.
No.
This is a player who the Leafs drafted in the 2nd round, who 2 years ago was second in the AHL in scoring, led the team in playoff scoring. He didn't make it because he was more of a top 6 forward type in terms of he's not strong defensively, but he's really good offensively. And they had Kapanen, Nylander, and Marner, so they had no room for him. And instead, we still don't know what his off the ice issues were this year. But if you look at his stats this year, he scored 34 points in 44 games. This could be a really good signing for Carolina.
I like it for them. Yeah,
he'll probably start out in Charlotte, but if they have an injury, he may get a chance. And I wouldn't doubt that he's going to have a decent NHL career.
Yeah, well, so it was Bracco, and also they signed David Gust and Sheldon Rempel.
I don't know who David Gust is. He's a 26-year-old free agent.
Yeah, I'm not real familiar with him.
Yeah, not familiar either. But yep. So there you have it.
A lot of teams are signing AHL guys now.
Yeah,
the Rangers signed Darren Radish, Taylor's brother,
and Gabriel Fontaine.
Yeah, I mean those are guys for
my puppy. I'll be right back. Before
either AHL or the taxi squad. Again, we may end up having these big taxi squads like Major League Baseball had, and a guy like Bracco would be sitting on the taxi squad waiting for an injury, and that could be his biggest break, actually.
Well, the Kings just signed Quentin Byfield, and we had on the 3-year ELC, and on the heels of Lafreniere signing his deal. I mean, they're both going to get the full bonuses. So
sure.
There's another team, Kev. Los Angeles really hasn't done much.
No, nor should they. They're still starting to prepare for their rebuild, and they're going to do it the tricky way, which is they're not going to strip it down to the chassis, because they've got Doughty and they've got Kopitar, so they're going to try to change it on the fly. That often fails, so we're going to have to see what happens there.
Well, I wanted one more team I wanted to ask you, and we debated about this team earlier in the week. It's the Islanders, because the Barzal situation is fascinating. They essentially gave away Devin Taves because they couldn't afford to pay him. So they have Barzal, they have Kulak, and they're supposedly shopping Johnny Boychuk and Leo Komarov to clear cap space. I say good luck to that, because nobody's
no takers. Yeah.
I mean, I don't know what Lou does unless he forces Barzal into a bridge deal.
Well, we've already seen what he had to do. Like how honest, can you be? Then Lou Lamoriello of all people coming out and saying, I didn't want to trade him,
yeah,
but I had to, eventually. Like that was just terrific.
Right. This
hear that
is Stella.
Oh,
Stella's a 9-month-old corgi.
Nice ears.
Yep. She's got the big ears.
Those are 747 ears.
That's you can get Canadian satellite. We're joking on here. But yeah, she's a really good little dog. Honestly, she's been great. So
until she starts barking.
Oh, she does. It is like having a child again. It is getting up in the middle of the night and so.
But is she going to predict games and scores and such?
We'll see what she does. Hopefully, with any luck at all. I want to thank everybody for watching this week, and everybody for all the great panel we had. This is like the dream team panel today. And we will you all right? All right. We'll be back again on Monday. Remember, without the buzz, it is just hockey.